Right. So now we are recording. Another nice feature that I'll call your attention to, if you go to the File menu in the upper left-hand corner and you select the option to either save or save as, you can save the document, and the document that you're saving is Tim's presentation, and you can save that. It defaults to save as a universal communications format. I'd pick the PDF format, portable document format, and then you'll have a copy of this presentation. Now, it's obviously not intended for you to be distributing that, but if you just want to refer back to that at some point, you have that accessible. So I'm going to unmute Tim's microphone. Are you there, Tim?
Yes, I am.
Great. Well, so I've, I think, oriented people to the webinar interface, and it's my pleasure now to introduce Tim Levatich. Tim is a friend and somebody that I've known for many, many years. We became acquainted through the New York Forest Owners Association, and Tim and his father have hosted numerous woods walks for the New York Forest Owners, and currently Tim, every other year when I teach my class, is gracious enough to provide a woods walk for my forest management maple syrup class so that they can get a feel for what it's like to see the woods through the eyes of a private forest owner. Tim comes to this with a degree in forest management. Tim now works in database management, so he's gone from trees to managing other data bits or something like that. So, but as Tim's very knowledgeable, and Tim's given a version of this presentation for the local NYFOA chapter, and I think it's a great look into the way a forest has been managed through time. And I'll just leave it at that and turn it over to Tim. I'm going to mute my microphone, and Tim, the floor is yours, and I look forward to the presentation. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, Pete. Can everybody hear me okay? I've attended many of these seminars in the audience, at the audience end. Oh, good. Thank you. You can hear me. And it's my privilege today to be a presenter. Thank you, Pete, for inviting me. It's a real honor. So this presentation is a little bit unusual in that we're going to be talking about a place and using pictures and descriptions of what we've done in this place to hopefully pass along some tips and knowledge and lessons learned so that people can use this information on their own woodlot or landowners they work with, and maybe take some shortcuts and shortcuts on the learning phase. So this property we call the Hobnob, and also Hobnob Forest. We've been managing this for almost 40 years. It was purchased by my folks in 1975. The man in the orange coat is my father, Peter Levatich. He managed the woods at a very high level, and here he's showing Brenda, her sister-in-law, something in the distance. He loved showing people what he was doing. He loved hosting wood walks and interacting with people so that he could learn things as well. So just a little bit of basic information here. The forest is located in New York State in the Finger Lakes region in the southeast corner of Tompkins County. And we've been managing it intensively for 39 years. It's about 130 acres, mostly woods. And our management goals are what you see listed there: recreation, sawtimber, wildlife, water quality, and fuel wood. I list recreation first, not because we've put most of our attention and effort into that, but because most people relate to our forest in that way. So there's berry picking that happens every summer, or most summers, I'll say. The wild blackberry crop isn't completely consistent. But we and our neighbors walk our dogs and ski in the wintertime. We have various family events at the property. One event that we've done for a long time is Thanksgiving walk, where we all gather at the cabin, have brunch, and then walk 8 miles to our mom's house for Thanksgiving dinner. We've done that almost every year for 40 years, and it's a great tradition. We also gather every hunting season, friends and neighbors, and hunt for white-tailed deer. So again, my emphasis in listing the recreation goal first is that a lot of people enjoy the property, and neighbors bring their friends to walk the trails or ski the trails, and the road system, as I will talk about later, plays a vital role in all aspects of the forest. As Pete mentioned, we host woods walks periodically. I don't know how many woods walks we've hosted over the 39 years, but it's certainly in the dozens. And as I mentioned before, Dad really enjoyed showing the things he was working on to pass along tips to others. And he recognized the opportunity to discuss with others face to face what was happening, what they were seeing on the ground. And he learned a lot in these discussions. So he was keen on sharing information and increasing the knowledge base in the landowner community. He also mentioned the college and university courses, students that come out once in a while. And there, the handsome gentleman in the red hat on the left is Peter Smallage, our host. The students, I find, are eager to learn, and they ask really good questions and are always appreciative of the opportunity to tour a woodlot and hear what we're doing and ask their questions. So here's a photo, aerial photo from 1936, and it shows the area both on the property and surrounding it was open. A lot of farming and pasture area on the property and in the surrounding area. This is about the time when farms were being abandoned, particularly on the hilltops, and we are on a hilltop, and that'll come into our discussion a little later. So I'm just going to show you roughly. There's a hilltop here on the left side of the property. What my laser pointer is showing on your screen. And then there's sort of a saddle as I move the pointer eastward. There's sort of a ridge line and a saddle. And there's another hilltop over here way at the eastern end of the property. So that has an effect on soils and how trees grow, and I'll explain that in a little while. You'll also notice that down here on the north side of the laser pointer, here's forest that existed, and looking at the crowns, the little bumpy crowns here on the image from the air, it shows me that these were trees that were well along in their life at that time. And sure enough, today, that's where our largest trees are growing. First thing I'm going to talk about is maps. Dad was an architect. He was very good at drawing things. He was always sketching and planning and visualizing how he wanted things to be. So this is a property map. And again, I'll use this laser pointer. I hope that is working. So there's the main house is here by the road. And the cabin that you saw in the earlier slides is right here, kind of in the lowest point of the saddle between the two hilltops. And then most of these lines you see running around the property are woods roads that he constructed over the span of about the first 10 years or so. And I'll point out some things about roads that we have found very, very helpful. Now, along the bottom here is the town road. That's Baylor Road. So that's a single lane dirt road that we use to get to our houses. Another thing he did with maps is record what was done, sort of like a diary. And it's really handy. He made a photocopy each year of the map, and then he could sketch and highlight where and what was done in that year, right there on the map. He punched holes in it, put it in a binder, and that binder is an accurate record of tree planting, thinnings that we did, logs that we cut, roads that we built, unusual wildlife sightings or unusual trees that we found for the first time. It's really an interesting read to flip through those maps. So that's one tip. Another tip is naming the roads. Here we have on the left Rim Road going in either direction, Turkey Road going off to the right. We must be at the start of Turkey Road in the cabin. The intersection on the left of Valley Trail and 5 Acre Trail, and on the right, the intersection of Home Run and Crossover. Here's a tip I want to pass along. You should name your roads carefully. Sunset Trail and Summit Trail are next to each other. They sound sort of the same, and it's easy to confuse them. So keep that in your list of tricks. Another thing we found beneficial with roads is to name them in relatively short segments. And this is very helpful. Here we've got, let me get my pointer back. In orange, we've got the Cove Road. From the starting point at Turkey Landing, it circles around, it goes down to the lowest point of the property. The other highlight that I've done here is in yellow. That's the Red Trail. I should have used red, but yellow looked a little more different than orange, so I'll use yellow. So these roads have a relatively finite and relatively short distance compared to the size of the property, and that's really good for locating things and in talking to other people. So for instance, if I'm going out thinning or cutting firewood, I can tell my wife that I'm going to be along Red Trail down near the intersection of Crossover, and I would be right here where this laser pointer is. So she knows about where I am. And I carry a two-way radio. I do a lot of work alone, and it's not a safe practice, but I do carry a powerful green radio VHF band, which is very good for going over the hill and through the woods and being very clear on her end. We use those a lot. Now, in contrast, if you had a road that started at one end of the property and meandered all the way to the other side and had one name, you couldn't really use that road name to locate yourself because it's a long road, it's a large distance, and you know, it's not a finite space relative to the property. The other thing I'll point out about roads is, let's see if I can use this highlighted thing. Yeah, here we go. So right here is the cabin landing. Let's see, change to a different color. There we go. And all the roads, all the skid roads, the forest roads flow from the outer bounds of the property toward the cabin landing. So if I'm working out here in the northwest corner, out along the north loop, and I'm skidding firewood, I can skid it up this way, up Valley Road, 5 Acre Trail to the cabin landing. If I'm working out in the northeast corner along Turkey Road Extension, which is out here, I can skid my firewood logs along Turkey Road Extension and Turkey Road and get to the cabin landing. I'm out here in the southwest corner, I can come up the Whitaker Road, take the cabin road, and get to the landing. Now, why is that important? You can't skid logs around sharp corners. It helps to have nice flowing curves. And grade should be gradual. You don't want to be going up steep hills and down steep hills because you can start having erosion issues on steep slopes. And the cabin landing is key because starting near the cabin landing, I'm highlighting in yellow now. This is the road that connects the cabin landing, which is that clearing you saw in the Woods Walk cabin picture, to the main town road. And that's where trucks loaded with logs or firewood or friends' cars loaded with fire, whatever, can get from the cabin landing, which is our main processing area, to the town road. Now, a full log truck is pretty heavy. It's, I think, 50, 60,000 pounds. And so you need to have a very sturdy road to support that kind of weight. And by investing that extra gravel and work into a relatively short truck road from the cabin landing and flowing all of our woods roads into the cabin landing, it really helps and is efficient in our management activities. Another point on roads is you need to keep the water off. Now, our soils are clay and rocks, and more clay, it seems, and we have a lot of seeps on the property. The problem with water is once it gets on the road and you start running over it with vehicles and skidding logs and so forth, you develop pockets and more water collects there, and things get muddy, and then you drive over it again and the hole gets bigger and more water collects in it, and pretty soon it's a royal mess and only a tractor can get through it, and your logs get all full of mud and gravel, which is hard on your saw chain. So early on, Ted thought, I got to deal with this water. So he had a local gentleman with a backhoe come in, and in certain areas where water is a problem, and we have several seeps on this uphill left side here, he ditched along the uphill side, piled the spoils, the heavy clay and rock from the ditch onto the road, just piled it in a heap, let it drain and dry out over several months, and then came back with his tractor and smoothed it out. The road has a crown, so any rain falling down on the road will run off generally either one side or the other, and then any water coming out of the seeps on the hill will come down, hit the ditch, and be conducted away and not get the road surface wet. This is Turkey Road. The cabin is away here in the distance. This road's been here for, over 35 years. We use it regularly. It's in great shape. The only maintenance I have to do on it now is mow the weeds and grass once a year. And that's it. It's really effective in staying hard, staying clear, and being a great service to us. There's investment there for the backhoe time, of course, and we've owned our woodlot a long time. Each landowner has to make their own decisions to what the economics of building roads are in their particular case. But for us, it's worked really well, and as I mentioned before, it serves to support the recreation activities and skiing and walking and hunting, and getting firewood, getting from one side of the property to the other efficiently. Quick egress in case somebody is injured, God forbid. So a good road system is very helpful. Just a word about culverts. This is a spot not far from the previous picture, but it shows water going through some, I think it's a cluster of three-inch PVC pipes conducting water into the road. It's not thick enough and hard enough, and the culverts aren't strong enough to withstand a heavy skidder, but it seems to support the tractor okay, and it's a relatively low investment. It didn't cost a lot. As a contrast, I took a few pictures one day on another property, and my point here on roads is this particular road is not built to conduct the water away from it. So it's essentially become a small creek bed, and it doesn't look it from this picture, but this this erosion that's happened down the middle of it has made this road almost unusable. In the summertime, you can see where people are trying to drive four-wheelers up this road, and they're having to switch sides and crisscross this drainage erosion down the middle. So even for a four-wheeler, it's difficult to use this road. Now, you don't have to ditch something like this unless there's a real major seep nearby. You can use best management practices to install water bars and crown the road a little bit and keep any pooling or erosion on the road itself to a minimum. So you don't necessarily have to invest a lot in backhoe and bulldozer work. Just a few pictures on firewood. We've cut a lot of firewood over the years. The trees that we've taken out in our pre-commercial thinnings, the poor quality trees, the trees with rot, the or lots of branch knots that are lower grade in terms of hardwood, sawtimber. These are the types of trees that make good firewood. We've probably cut, I did a ballpark estimate of 250 standard cords over the 39 years. We've heated many houses with it. I had a firewood business in high school. It was one of the things that inspired me to pursue a degree in forestry. My brother had a firewood business for a little while as well. And we heat our house with wood and our domestic hot water as well. Dad was a very clever craftsman. This is a splitter he built that attaches a 3-point hitch on the tractor, powered from a hydraulic pump on the PTO. Very handy. You pick it up, drive wherever you need to go, put it down, go to work. It's been an excellent tool. So I mentioned thinning earlier. This is something we pursued early on, and it's called by a bunch of different names. Thinning, PSI, which stands for Timber Stand Improvement. Basal area thinning is a technique for marking trees where you gauge how many you're taking out by the effect on the density or basal area of the stand. There's another technique called crop tree management, where instead of relying on density and basal area, you go through the stand and pick out appropriate crop trees that are doing well and that you want to grow long term. And then you focus on making room for those trees so they can increase their crown volume and therefore their capacity for creating food. That's what the leaves do. One guy one time coined the term kitchen. He says the crown is the tree's kitchen. So that's where the food is made and sent down to the roots, and also supplies the fuel to grow the wood throughout the tree, twigs, branches, stem, and roots. And our goal with thinning was to reduce the density of the stand a little bit, and we were usually very conservative with our thinning operations so that the trees that we leave behind, the ones that were growing, can expand their crowns and grow faster. And the goal being to grow the highest quality wood on the best trees as fast as possible. So here's a close-up of the same chunk of white ash. We had this out for one of our wood walks, and you can see there's a nail in the wood. And then in the upper right, that's the pith or the center of the tree. So in the 4 or 5 inches between the center of the tree and that nail, there's 63 growth rings. The nail represents the thinning that was done in that stand around this particular tree in 1976. And obviously we left this tree there at that point. So 30 years later, in 2006 or so, we cut this tree for whatever reason. Maybe it was we had a white ash sawlog in it, and this was a piece of firewood left over. But for whatever reason, it shows very well that thinning works. So it took 63 years to grow the 4 or 5 inches to the nail, and then it took less than half that time to actually grow a lot more than that. So the growth rings really got a lot thicker. And if you think about the log that would have grown above this caught in the tree, and you measure the volume of that log, you're essentially multiplying your area of this circle represented by this cut face by the length of the log, coming up with your volume for that log. And if you're trying to grow saw logs like that, it's a big increase in your volume growth to have your radial growth, essentially in this case in cell creation, more than double. So area of the circle increases by the square of the radius. So we increased our growth rate on the log in this tree by 4 times by doing this thinning. Now our growth rate increase wasn't that dramatic everywhere, but it's always dramatic to see a tree go from a highly competitive dense stand to a thin stand, where growth rate on the trees that you're leaving behind and trying to grow for the future increases. It's a very satisfying effect. So all this road building and thinning takes work, and as people know, trees can be dangerous, so safety is important. I stole this picture off the internet, and here's another one I took. You don't want to be this beaver when you're working in the woods. You want to conduct yourself in as safe a manner as possible. Now, I took the game of logging safety training. Game of logging is a series of courses. There's one series geared for landowners, another series geared for loggers. I can't recommend this course. This instructor is Bill Lindloff. He travels around the Northeast training landowners and loggers in proper tree felling and safety techniques. At the time that I took these courses, I'd been running a chainsaw for 25 years, and it dramatically changed my technique. I got a lot better at dropping trees exactly where I wanted them to go. I was much safer. I felt less fatigue, which also factors into safety, because when you get tired, you can't react quickly. You're not thinking exactly the way you should to be the most safe. And the result of using these techniques was better efficiency, less fatigue, and more safety. You can get more done. It's also a very satisfying feeling with your limited time. You can get out there and get a lot done and be safe while you're doing it. So I would highly recommend Game of Logging. It's made a big difference in my woods work, and others I've talked to recommend it highly as well. It's hands-on, as you can see. Bill is about to tap the gentleman on the helmet to give him some feedback on what he's doing there. It's a full day, and it's 3 sessions: Game of Logging 1, 2, and 3 on different days. And it's an excellent way to become a very skilled operator of a chainsaw. So in our woods, we've sold Sawtimber 6 times, mostly in response to the emerald ash borer threat. About 8 years ago, Dad and I saw this bug coming. It's an Asian insect that was introduced to the United States in the Detroit area, probably carried in green wood pallets or packing materials from China. It came in on a freighter through the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Great Lakes. It is very effective in killing all ash trees, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of hope for the 4 ash species here in North America. So we thought, we've got a lot of great quality ash trees that we've been growing for many years. This particular one has a lot of what's called brown heart, darkened wood in the heartwood of the tree. That's atypical of our ash. We have typically much better quality than that. And you can see how straight this log is. It's 42 feet from the stump to the first branch, which on a hilltop site is unusual and very nice. Here you can see our tractor with the farming logging winch on the back. I'm pulling logs out to the skid road, which the tractor is parked right on and perpendicular to. It's difficult to winch logs downhill. You have to be careful about how you set up because they tend to roll sideways and the cable gets wrapped around trees and you'll run up there and unhook it and rethread the cable through the trees and attach it to the log and try again. So, but it helps to have them right along the road because then I can hook them up to the tractor and head towards the cabin landing. Here's another shot. This is another ash log. I think I ultimately bucked this into 3 logs for the mill. Our tractor's a recent model, John Deere, about 50 horsepower, 4-wheel drive, loaded tires, which means the tires have water in them for weight and calcium chloride added so that the water doesn't freeze in the wintertime. It's a very capable machine and just the right size. It will skid this, or it did actually skid this log uphill with no problem. I don't overload our equipment, and I'm not trying to make a living doing this logging, so it's nice to have good equipment and use it gently, and that way it's not broken and worn out all the time. You're not running to the dealer for parts. One technique you might consider is marking your keepers. And this slide is titled Felling Trees, Saving Your Keepers, because in the felling process, a big tree can come down and smash smaller trees that you might want to grow long term. So Dad came up with this idea of using plastic flagging to mark trees that we want to keep long term. And it turns out blue is actually very visible in all seasons of the year. Red and orange tends to sort of disappear in the fall. And blue seems to be a nice color even in the green of summer. You can still see it. So when you're standing at a tree you're going to cut, and you can look out in the distance and say, those nice oak trees out there that are now, it looks like 4 or 5 inches in diameter, I really want to save those, so I'll try and drop my tree to the left or to the right, and thus preserve those for the long term. So here's the cabin landing again. You can see the cabin in the background. These are white ash logs. Again, we've sold these 5 or 6 times now in the last, 8 years. So I do the logging myself, and then I contact a trucker and he loads them up. And we've been selling all of our ash to a tool handle mill, Ames True Temper in Pine Valley. They pay very good. They pay a very good price for high quality ash, which is what we're pulling out. I should say a very fair price. And it's interesting, when Dad and I were considering whether to sell our ash or not under this threat from emerald ash borer, we thought, we better get at this pretty quick, because once everybody else realizes that their ash is going to be killed by this bug, a lot of people are going to be logging ash. The mills that buy ash are going to become flooded with logs, and therefore, due to market economics, the log price will drop. So we better get moving on this. But markets are strange. The price has actually gone up a little bit in the last 5 years, and it seems like the lumber market for ash worldwide has strengthened. Lumber mills that saw ash logs into boards for the furniture market are paying more. So the Ames True Temper folks had to bump their price up a little bit so they could get enough high quality material for their tool handle business. So it's worked out okay. As markets go, stock market or whatever, it's really hard to anticipate what's going to happen. You just got to take your best guess and go for it. So here's just an example of one tree skidding it towards the cabin. Same tree bucked into 3 logs. This very white substance you see on the ends is what's called end coating. It's kind of like a waxy paint that dries to a tough, waxy coating. And here you can see in this scene the leaves are out. This is spring, actually late spring. Ash logs will dry out and crack pretty severely in some cases, and you've got to keep the water in the log essentially, which is what this end coating does. So that's why I use this. So then you get your logs out. It takes me 6 weekends, working usually both days, several hours to put a truckload of logs together. It's a lot of hard work, but I love doing it. So it's great then on a trucking day to see an expert trucker who's usually very good with his grapple loader. Just pick through your logs and carefully load them one by one, and they roll down the road. Now we've also in our history of this property had one stumpage sale, and the stumpage sale is where you sell the trees standing up. Log sale is you cut the logs first, you pay the trucker, and then the mill sends you a check for the logs. The stumpage sale is different. The timber buyer will come in, typically a forester, and the trees that you have marked. The price is either bid or negotiated, and the contract is drawn up, and then the buyer hires a professional logging crew to come in and cut the trees and take the logs to the mill. So this cutting happened in the winter of 2007. I wish I could tell you the names of the crew, because they did a spectacular job. I've got it in my notes somewhere, but I couldn't find it when I looked for it the other day. They came in, they drove up every day from Pennsylvania. Their machines were running before daybreak, so they must have left it really early in the morning from their homes. It was really cold out. They did a great job. The ground was frozen. In the spring, you could barely tell that these machines had been here. It was just wonderful and a good experience. I have to tell you a funny story about this stumpage sale. It actually started with some sugar maple trees by the pool. They were shading the pool in the afternoon, so Dad said, "Hey, cut these trees down over here for firewood." So I took a look at them, came back to him, and I said, "Well, you know, Dad, these are Sawtimber trees. We really shouldn't cut them off firewood." So then we started looking around the property, and there was some overmature trees along the rim road and some mature trees down in the cove, and said, "Hey, let's put together a small stumpage sale and see how that goes." And it was a very good experience. Okay, switching topics a little bit to talk about boundary lines. It's important to mark your boundary lines so that you and your neighbor and anybody working in your woods or your neighbor's woods knows where the boundary line is. Here you can see, I hope you can see, some red paint and blazes, as well as some orange flagging on this tree. And then in the distance, there's more orange flagging going down the hill. I try to position myself in line with the property line to show this. Here's another picture. I'm on the property line again, looking at this tree that has a red blaze on it and an orange ribbon. I put these here. I used to do a lot of boundary line work when I was working as a consulting forester, and so I felt confident in doing it. You can hire a forester to mark your boundary lines. On the left, the neighbor had a timber sale several years ago. Fortunately, our lines were already marked because this beautiful sugar maple tree is on our side of the lawn. So having your boundary lines marked makes it real clear where the line is and whose trees are whose, and avoids mistakes. One good thing to do is when you're locating your boundary lines and your corners is to ask your neighbor to join you and walk it together and figure out where the line is. In our case, we did know our neighbors, but all our corners were well marked, and I had a lot of experience doing it, so I went ahead and marked them and felt confident that it was correct. Another thing I want to talk about today is the Restore New York Woodlands initiative. This is an initiative by the New York Forestland Association. It's based on studies by leading professionals in forest management, and also based on polling data from professional foresters around the state. New York State is facing some severe challenges, and these challenges are impacting what is going to become the next forest. Specifically, the challenges are white-tailed deer, interfering vegetation, and high grading. So the deer are really much more numerous than they were when the current forest that we see on the hillsides across our state came to be. There were almost no deer actually at that time. Now they're very numerous, and there are studies now that actually show that the species composition of the forest is being changed by this deer pressure. Desirable trees are being eaten, and the undesirable species tend to be shunned by deer and not eaten. So the effect is to encourage the undesirable species and allow them to outcompete the trees that we want to grow. That's the interfering vegetation part. High grading is a practice where the best trees are cut and the less valuable trees are left to grow. It's not a progressive or intelligent way to manage a forest, and high grading is actually severely impacted the forest stands where it's been practiced. So this is a challenge. It's actually all three of these are a public education challenge, and the New York Forest Owners Association has taken this on because we want to have healthy forests growing in the future, and if we want that across the state, which and most of the forest land is owned by private individuals, we're going to have to address these issues and turn the trend in a more positive direction. So what do we do at the Hobnob? Hunting. Here's Dad sitting, waiting for a deer to come by. We are focusing on regeneration. Here you can see a lot of nice young sugar maple seedlings. You see this patch here, but there's no sugar maple seedlings growing. I sprayed a striped maple shrub or clump here. And unfortunately, the overspray hit the sugar maples too, but spraying striped maple is just about the only way to deal with it. That and custom treatments. So it was something that I tried. And, over the whole scene that we see here, not a lot of regeneration and sugar maple got killed, but I'm seeking a better way so we don't have that happen. Okay, here's another spot that illustrates undesirable plants in the understory. I'm standing right on a woods road, and I turned to the left and took the picture on the left, and then I turned to the right and took the picture on the right. And the difference that you can see right away is on the right, and there's all these tan leaves. That's American beech. And in the left-hand picture, work has been done. You can see this dead little beech stalk here. Effort was made to reduce the component of beech in the understory. Now, why do we want to do that? Beech is a nice tree, and it grows well in our areas, our part of the country. Very hardy and has good wood. The problem with it is that starting several decades ago, another foreign insect pest, the beech scale, which carries a fungus called nectria, made its way into our area from the Canadian Maritimes, slowly across the landscape. It moves pretty slowly. And the nectria fungus really strongly impacts the quality of beech wood. Now, if you let beech grow like this on the right, it ultimately will become the climax species. It casts such heavy shade that nothing grows underneath it except more beech. So in the long term, a beech stand will become and stay a beech stand in the absence of a severe fire or something like that. So we have to, if we want to grow high quality forest products of other species, we have to get rid of beech. And that's what we've done here on the left. So again, this is an example of dealing with the undesirable plants in order to regenerate the forest to the species that we would like. Here's another example. This is also on the Hobnob, where honeysuckle, this shrubby stuff, has taken over this area. And we have other undesirable species, and I have them listed here. American beech brush. Beech brush is the thicket of young beech that results from the root sprouting of mature beech trees that are on their way out or dying. Striped maple is an issue on our forest. Hay-scented fern and New York fern, which, if established on the ground, can chemically impede the seed germination of the desirable trees that we want to grow. So we need to work against having a dense carpet of hay-scented fern and New York fern in the woods. That will impact what we're trying to do. Multiflora rose, black swallowwort's an invasive that I'm battling in one spot on the property. Autumn olive and privet have also been observed. They're not a big problem yet, but invasive species and undesirable plants are something that is looming bigger and bigger on my radar. So regeneration is what we're after. We've got some cherry and sugar maple in the foreground. The light green you see is American beech, so I'm going to have to go into this stand and work with that. This picture is in an area with some mature trees in the overstory. This is the after image, if you will, the image of success. What we don't see in this picture, and I tried to find the image and couldn't in my older print photos, this stand used to have a second story, a second canopy of striped maple that completely filled most of this picture and cast such dense shade that nothing was growing on the ground. Striped maple will seed prolifically, and it can get in the way of regeneration. So I had to go in there and cut all those striped maple trees down. The recommended procedure at the time was to allow the trees to leaf out for 2 growing seasons and then spray the big bushy plants that resulted. And that was a lot of work. You sort of can't see it. This is about a 30% slope, and you spray in August. So I was marching up and down this slope with a 5-pound backpack sprayer on filled with water and herbicide, and spraying these huge 6-foot by 6-foot bushes of straight maple. But the results are good, and underneath all the blackberries that you see here, there are sugar maple trees growing as seedlings, so it's a success. So looking long term, we're trying to start the next forest beneath our crop trees, and you have to deal with these undesirable plants on the ground first before you open up the canopy. That's the lesson we learned back on this slide. We had cut overstory beech that was rotten and poorly formed, but we failed to notice that there was striped maple in the understory. And over the course of the next couple decades, those trees took over, and so we had to go back and deal with them again. So it pays to do it first. And this picture is a little difficult to see, but there's a second canopy here of sugar maple, this nice warm brown fuzzy layer that you see in here. Those trees are about 25 feet tall, and they're forming the next forest. Another challenge we face is disease. We have a problem with fusarium fungus on our hilltops and ridgeline where the soil is thin. This is a drought exacerbated fungus. The trees become stressed by drought, and the fungus gets in there and creates these lesions. You can see here, this one is not quite so distinct, but this one is very typical up here. And the tree is trying to heal over a small wound made by the fungus. In summer, it looks like this. These dark patches here are sap actually weeping out of holes in the living tissue that the fungus has made. And these holes get occupied by the fungus, and then over here you can see a piece of firewood that was cut. Here's the lesion. The tree's trying to heal over this wound, and it takes several years to do this. The fungus is able to resist the tree healing itself, and what you end up with is this bark inclusion in the wood, which is not good for high-quality sugar maple sawtimber. So again, fortunately, this is only a problem that occurs on our hilltops and ridgeline, so it's limited in scope. Another challenge we've had with insects is forest tent caterpillar. This picture on the left is June 2006. These trees should be full of leaves. This picture on the right is September of the same year. This is Dad taking a rest. We were out cruising measuring some white ash sawtimber trees. This tree you see on the left that actually has leaves is a red maple. The forest tent caterpillar doesn't seem to like red maple for some reason, but it loves sugar maple. And here's the masses of caterpillars that result. Normally, it is a native pest. It's normally a 3 to 4 year cycle. Our woods were infested for 6 years. And unfortunately, this is what happens. We've had hundreds of sugar maple crop trees killed by this stress. We've had a couple droughts, and the stress of all the leaves being eaten off. The tree puts on a second set of leaves late in the summer to try and make some sugar, build up some starch in the roots so that we put out leaves the following year. All of this activity is very stressful on the trees. So there are plenty of challenges. I took this picture as one of our loads of nice white ash logs was rolling up the road. Tree farming can be a rough road. That's the message here. We've got our tree farm sign in the town close to the road because it's kind of soft in the spring. But through all the challenges, the satisfactions are many. And as I mentioned earlier, the recreation use of the property is enjoyed by many. So the message here is enjoy your forest. Brett Chedsoy, a Crawford Extension forester, passed along this bit of advice. Don't let your forest be a source of stress. I like that one. So messages taken to take away. I realize I'm going a little bit long on time here. What's worked for us is to seek knowledge and advice from state foresters and other sources. Get chainsaw safety training. Be part of the American Tree Farm System and New York Forest Owners Association, or the Forest Owners Association that I'm sure exists in your state. Create a management plan for your forest so that you know where your priorities are according to your goals, and what to work on first and second and third. Again, safety training, logging is, I can't recommend that enough. A solid road network with good signs and road names is very helpful, vital in fact. Thin your stands to get your growth rate going on your better trees, and deal with your problem plants before you open up the canopy and bring light down to the forest floor. And Dr. Ralph Nyland is an emeritus professor from SUNY Syracuse, silviculturist. His watch phrase is shoot more deer. That seems to be one of the few maybe the only control methods we have left. Use maps to plan and record your operations and mark your boundary lines. So that's it for me. With that, we can get to questions.
Great job, Tim.
Thank you.
So there have been a couple of questions that came up. So there's questions about the you mentioned the product that you used on the end of the logs. And so people, as we're talking here, please feel free to be typing in questions. Also see the exit survey that I've posted as a link. So Trevor and Ron were asking about what the end coating was called. I remembered one that had been advertised on the back page of the NYFOA Forest Owner magazine, so I posted a link to that. That was called an anchor seal.
That's what we use. Yeah.
Okay, so you use the anchor seal product, and I'm sure there are other products out there. We're not necessarily trying to pump that particular vendor, but that's one that Tim has experience with. So
yeah, it works very well.
Is there a time of year when you're more likely to use that than other times?
Well, as I mentioned in ash, the summertime, your drying rate because of the warmth and dry air increases, so your logs dry out faster. If I were logging ash in winter, and there's some safety considerations there, wallowing around in the snow is not as safe as walking and driving on solid ground. I probably wouldn't have to use the end coating at all. But because I log in the spring and I want to keep the moisture in the logs, I almost always, when I'm bringing each log to the landing and bucking them, I end coat them right away. It's just amazing how fast some of these logs can split. Other species like sugar maple don't seem to have this splitting problem. But ash is just real finicky in warm, dry conditions.
Great. All right. So I thought you had some really good suggestions to their lessons learned, and everybody, I'm thinking about this from a forest owner's perspective. I'm in our own woods, and everybody has done some things and not done others, and so the personal perspective of the great lessons are the ones we haven't done yet. I like the notion of the using maps, annually using a map, and then marking on there what you've done. I have a database that I try to keep kind of an ongoing list of, here's the stand that I worked and I did such and such, but usually I do that in January or March, and it's a little tough remembering. If I was looking at a map, I think it'd be easier to think about where I had done what particular work.
Yeah, and the maps are kind of nice because it's almost like finger painting in a way compared to sitting at a computer all day. You have this map and you can draw all over it, and write things down and circle areas that you've worked, and it's just a real it's just a different and very enjoyable way to keep the information.
Sure. So, and Nancy Baker is seconding that yearly map exercise. She notes that it's worth the price of admission. So, maybe Nancy, I'm not sure who's taking your admission fees, but so Dave wants to know, how do you make your signs?
Dad did those just using, I think it must be pressure treated 1x3 wood, and then he had lettering templates for a router, and he actually routed the sign names based on these templates. I've not done it myself. The signs have lasted 35 years or better, and they're in perfect shape. So it must be pressure treated wood. And then you paint them to make the names and the pointed end more visible. And we attach them with a long aluminum nail or galvanized nail, leaving plenty of distance between the bark of the tree and the sign, because the tree will grow and kind of grab onto the tip of that nail. And I actually have to go around and redo some of our signs because the tree growth will actually pull the head of the nail through the sign. So if you kind of put them on stilts, they'll last a long time.
All right. We've done some work with fencing, attaching fencing to batten strip boards, and we'll use a fender washer with an aluminum nail. And then as the tree grows and it pushes against the sign or the board pushes against the fender washer, and that floats the aluminum nail.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another option.
Steph Kelly's chiming in here. She painted the signs.
Right.
Steph is my sister. One of my 3 sisters. Thanks. Thank you, Steph. Good job.
So you showed the impacts, Tim, of the forest tent caterpillar, and was that also in an area where you'd done some crop tree management to release some of those sugar maples?
Yeah, and actually there's some interesting interactions that I don't fully understand. Yeah, that was a probably 15-acre area that Dad had used crop tree management techniques in. It's also an area that on the soil maps has a thinner soil type. So I'm not exactly sure what the direct correlation is. It seems like more trees died in that area after the caterpillar infestations of 2005 to 2010. And it's actually a dramatic, there's more, it seems like there's more sky there than trees now, which is unfortunate because he did a lot of work there and there were some nice trees growing. But in driving through our hillsides in our area, that the worst year is 2006, where whole hillsides were just completely stripped of leaves. It seemed like areas that had been cut recently, either by selling timber or by thinning forest, were actually more defoliated than unmanaged tight stands. And I don't understand the interaction there either, but I think on our area along the North Loop where the soil is thin, the soil is fairly heavy, it's clay-based. It's thinner, so there's not as much organic matter in the soil there to serve as a moisture reservoir, which I think allows the trees to handle the drought stress better. And I think it was a combination of factors, and the defoliation was just too much, and the trees gave up and in a lot of cases died after the successive defoliations.
Right. Had you considered doing any spraying with like BT, the Bacillus thuringiensis variety?
We talked about it, Dad and I, briefly. It's an expense that we didn't want to incur. I forget the dollars per acre to hire a spray plane. We, based on our knowledge of the neighbors, we probably would have been the only woodlot the owners of which would be interested in doing that. And it really pays, if you're going to do a BT spraying, to get a bunch of neighbors together and get several hundred acres put together. The spraying operation is real particular about timing and weather, and it's more cost effective if you have a lot more acres than just the 130 that we were managing. Now, Cotton Hanlon owns a lot of land. They're a lumber company in this area, and they actually calculated their annual value growth of their sugar maple. And they figured out it was a lot cheaper to spray every year and forestall any of this, or prevent any of this defoliation from happening, than it was to save the cost of spraying and let the trees become defoliated and suffer the impact on growth and suffer the mortality. So they figured out that economically on their acreage it made sense to do it, and they did so. Bob O'Brien is their chief forester, and he was saying the interesting effect is that if you spray against forest tent caterpillar for several years in a row, the forest tent caterpillars outside of their property actually sought out their trees because they were lush and nutritious. So they were sort of attracting the caterpillar in later years because their trees were healthy and growing well.
Right. So there's a couple other comments here. Let's see. So Ralph Johnson points out, I hadn't heard of this. So this is neat. He says it in Google Earth. There's a history tab, so you can maybe go back and probably varies from location to location, but it'd be worth going to Google Earth and then and then plucking that, picking that history tab to look at some old aerial photos or satellite imagery. So Trevor Evans mentions that there are 2 American beech species, which I've not heard about. So maybe Trevor, if you're still on, you can plug in some more information, or I'll go see about finding, so I can find more information about it. I'm aware that there's some thinking that there's a resistant variety of American beech that's resistant to the beech bark disease.
And beech is an excellent wildlife tree. The nuts, the beech nuts, are very rich in protein and a lot of calories. It's a great wildlife tree, and I've actually seen articles where you can use a system to sort of gauge the disease level of your mature beech and use that information to manage the beech and keep some of it around for as long as possible to support wildlife populations. And so that's a route to go also.
Okay, so Walter wants to know if you have any suggestions for stabilizing abandoned railroad riverbanks that contain some large oaks that are now toppling into the river. It sounds like that's the river maybe undercutting the bank. Is that
right? It sounds like it. Well, if it's a river, that's a big force to have to deal with. I would be tempted to salvage the oaks that are in imminent danger of falling into the water. It sounds expensive to me to do stream bank stabilization on a river because of the flood stage forces that are involved. So without knowing more, I
guess you could. I like the idea of maybe salvaging the oaks and then maybe planting in some other tree species that are common on those riverbanks, like cottonwood and silver maple and box elder and things like that are maybe of lesser value economically, but would be a great species to stabilize the banks. And when it does flood, they would reduce the velocity of the water.
Yep, their roots would hold the soil along the bank and resist the erosive force of the river. Yep, that's a good idea.
So, all right. So Trevor's going to try and send me the link to the federal study. And and I've started, for those of you that are on the Ning site, I posted that earlier. Let me put that link up here again.
There's a question here from Ronald Farr about shiitake mushrooms. Can you use it for shiitake mushrooms? Perhaps he's referring to ash. I'm not an expert or even very knowledgeable in mushroom growth. I've heard about inoculating oak bolts.
So he's talking about using the end coat.
Oh, sorry.
So there's earlier, Steve.
I would guess you could. It's not toxic to my knowledge. So yeah, you could probably do that and maintain the moisture in your mushroom bolts. It's a good idea.
Steve Gabriel had been on earlier. I don't know if he still is, if he's here. And Steve gave a mushroom webinar, I'll say a few months ago, maybe it was a year ago. Steve does a lot of personal commercial production and also works with Ken Mudge in the Department of Horticulture here. So Steve may have, if Steve's on, he can perhaps also chime in on that. But yeah, managing moisture is helpful. So I posted a link to the cornellforestconnect.ning.com site, and I've started a blog related to this webinar. And when if Trevor's able to find that federal report, I'll post that on the Ning site so other people can see what's been found about American beech. So, well, yeah, that'd be great if there was. So Tim, it looks like the questions have slowed down. I want to thank you for putting this presentation together. It was very good, and I think it was a great illustration of all that goes into what it takes to manage private forest lands. So you and your family have been at it for a lot of years, and it shows, and you're reaping the benefits and dealing with the challenges. So
yeah, thanks, Pete. It's been very enjoyable and a lot of work, and we love it.
Yes, indeed. So Tim will be back again tonight live with this presentation at 7 p.m. And until then, I'm going to turn this off, and you all have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.